Okay, so let's just pick up from where we left. So basically, in these slides, I explained to you first. I explained to you as long as two countries has different opportunity costs, and then they can always reach a deal, and deal is going to benefit both party, right? But now the last question I was trying to explain to you is there are many different deals. Like here, so I just show you two possible price, and both price make both party benefit from trade with each other. But so the two price differ in the sense, so B is going to benefit US and A is going to benefit Brazil a little bit more. Now the last question I raise is, so at the end of the day, so which price or which deal will they agree with each other? Should they agree with B or should they agree with A? Right? And then, so the short answer to this is, so this largely depending on their bargaining power. What's bargaining power? Essentially, is like, so to how many, how much, how much power you have in negotiating the term, right? And clearly, so if the U.S. has more bargaining power, and then so the price will move towards more the B side, or it's going to benefit U.S. more. On the other hand, so if Brazil has more bargaining power, and then so the price will move towards A instead of B, right? And so I mentioned this, just want to emphasize or highlight. So in reality, there are things besides economics will dictate what is going on. Right? So before I explain to you this A and B, I just simply show you the pure economics behind the trade. But in reality, it's a little bit more complicated, right? And also that may partially explain so why we are observing the reversal of globalization. Because globalization, yes, it benefits everybody, but so it may benefit each country in a different way, and benefit the population in a different way. And then so over time, so we may create, so we create winner, at the same time we may create loser. But then so once the loser getting worse and worse, and more people becomes loser, and then so we are going to see the reversal of globalization, right? So that's kind of a little bit beyond the clause, but I find out it's quite important to emphasize that. All right. So now let's move to next slides where we are. Right. Yes, so we have discussed these. Okay. So we just discussed comparative advantage, and I have explained to you comparative advantage lies in the heart of specialization, and explains why countries can benefit from each other through trade. Okay? So now there's a related concept, which is absolute absolute advantage. So we say a country has absolute advantage if this country can produce more output per worker than other country. Like in this case, US has absolute advantage in larger jet. And interesting, in this case, US also has absolute advantage in small jet. Okay, but however, so one country has comparative advantage in, say, in this case, L, and means it can has comparative advantage in A's. It's simply because the opportunity cost of one goods and the other goods, they are reciprocal. Like we saw earlier, right? So large jet, the opportunity cost is, so this is a larger jet opportunity cost, right? And here, and then the small jet opportunity cost will be, and then so if we look at Brazil, so the opportunity cost of larger jet is 3, and the small jet is 1/3. So you have larger jet opportunity cost is smaller than Brazil, and then most implies this 3/4 greater than this number. So this is for this one, this for this one. Right? So you have comparative advantage on L, and then so you must lose your comparative advantage in S. But you can have absolute advantage in both terms. But absolute advantage doesn't imply comparative advantage. Okay? So in some sense, absolute advantage is in absolute terms, like how much you can produce. But comparative advantage is in the relative term. So how much you can produce in terms of the other good, right? So that is the difference. And this slide highlight absolute versus comparative advantage. Just because the US can produce more of both goods doesn't mean we are better off without trade. Actually, we still can benefit because you must lose comparative advantage on something. Now you cannot have comparative advantage on everything. This is mathematically impossible. Okay. Now let's look at a few practice questions for us to better understand what we have learned. So there are 4 practice questions. If Texia specializes in food, it can produce 1,000 and 0 unit clothing. If it specializes in clothing, it can produce 500 and 0. This year, Albania can produce 500 and 0 and 200 and 0. So now this question asks you, who has absolute advantage? So maybe easiest way we just draw a diagram. So we have clothing, we have food, clothing. So Texia, so produce 1,000. So this is 1,000. Or 500. This is 500. So this is Texia. This is T. And Albania can produce 500 food or 200 clothing. Right, this is Albania. And then from here, so it is obvious, Texia has absolute advantage in both food and clothing, right? So now the next question is the same, information is the same. But now this question asks you who has comparative advantage. Now it's better to move back to previous slides because I already drew this diagram. Okay, so now let's look at the opportunity cost of food in terms of clothing. In Texia, so the opportunity cost of food will be 500 divided by 1,000. This is in Texia, equal to 1/2. In Albania, so the food, so this food. In Albania, the opportunity cost of producing food will be 200 divided by 500, equal to 2/5. Right? And then by looking at these two numbers, we can say, what do we learn? We learn Albania has comparative advantage in producing food, right? Because in Albania, it costs less than what it will cost in textiles to produce food. Okay, and then the answer is, so here food, who has a comparative advantage? So Albania has comparative advantage. And then so this immediately implies the other country has comparative advantage in the other thing, right? So the answer is B, right? Now we look at next one. If a country is specialized according to its own comparative advantage and then trade with other nations. Let's go one by one. A, it will operate at a point inside its PPF. So this is not, so by the way, so what this means is, so this is PPF. It says if you trade and then so you are here. So this is not true even without trade, right? So without trade, you're going to operate on this line. Now with trade, you're going to go beyond. So this is A. Now B, it can consume at a higher level than the domestic PPF. B is correct. Now let's see what happened to C. C, its PPF will shift or rotate inward. PPF doesn't change. What change is they are going to move from the middle of the line to here or here. Okay, meaning they are specialized. They were specialized. So C is not correct. D, it can consume at the same level as the domestic PPF. If that's the case, there's no point or there's no discussion of trade, no discussion of comparative advantage. Right. So let's do a quick discussion. Right. So here, ask you, what do you think? Would the US be better off if we did not import so much clothing from Bangladesh? So here, the reason why US might want importing clothing from Bangladesh is because of comparative advantage. Just remind yourself the example we started with. US is specialized in computer, and Mexico is specialized in shirt. Again, this is based on the hypothetical example we discussed at the beginning of today's class, right? And similarly in reality, so US is specialized producing high-tech product or high-tech service, right? And then so those developing countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, or Jordan, they are specialized in producing clothing, or in general we call low value added goods, right? And then certainly from the discussion we have, so US is going to be better off if we import in those cheap goods from those countries. But everything must come at a cost, right? So if we import lots of clothing from Bangladesh, and then certainly, so we are going to have costs and the benefit. The benefit is clear. So we are going to save money because it's cheaper, right? And actually we can spend our effort or resource to produce higher valued goods. Think about software, think about banking, think about higher education. But what's the cost? The cost is, and then so people may lose their job, whoever work in that sector, right? So that's the main cost. But then, so will that be a solution if we simply stop importing from Bangladesh? The answer is, I would say, probably no, right? So you cannot say, okay, so there's a cause, and then so we are going to shut down the trade. But that's not a permanent solution. A better solution would be, like early discussion we had, maybe just help those people who lost their job to find a job, or create more valuable job, and train our worker who lost their job due to this international trade. That probably is a better solution. Okay. So now we have last practice question. So suppose that in Australia, it takes 2 hours to harvest 10 bushels of apple and 4 hours to harvest 10 bushels of tomato. Suppose a worker in Brazil can harvest 10 bushels of apple in 4 hours and put 10 bushels of tomato in 5 hours. So this question has a lot of information. So now we need to, because they are in different units, we probably need to convert everything in the same unit. Right? So now, why not we just look at what they can produce in 1 hour? Okay, that's easier. So in Australia, and then so we can draw the diagram as we did before. So we have apple, we have tomato. In Australia, 2 hours get you 10 apples, meaning 1 hour, you're going to get 5 apples. Right, this is 5. And or 4 hours for 10 tomatoes, meaning so you have 2.5 tomato. So this is Australia. Now look at Brazil. Brazil, 4 hours give you 10 apple, meaning so you get 2.5 in 1 hour, or 10 tomato in 5 hours, meaning 2 in 1 hour. So this is 2. This is 2.5. Right? And then it should become easy or straightforward to find out who has comparative advantage on what, and who has absolute advantage on what. Right? So I leave the calculation for you. So I would like to stop here for today. And then, so we are going to see each other on Tuesday. Thank you so much for your attention.